What happens when a perfectly orchestrated television interview unexpectedly devolves into a fierce confrontation that no one, not even the most seasoned analysts, could have predicted? Imagine a moment when two of the most talked-about figures in modern monarchy, whose every action is meticulously tracked by millions, find themselves embroiled in a heated dispute unfolding before a vast audience. Today, we delve into an analysis of the most sensational and electrifying event in recent television history. It was a clash of such force and unpredictability that it left the studio audience in shock and sparked a wave of indignation worldwide. A tense, almost palpable atmosphere of anticipation hung in the studio as cameras began to roll on what was supposed to be a routine interview. The host, surrounded by her colleagues, welcomed the high-profile guests with the professional warmth that had made the show a daytime staple for decades. Prince Harry was the first to enter the television studio, his dutiful smile seemingly a mask for the inner turmoil that was soon to erupt. Meghan Markle followed closely, her composed demeanor signaling a readiness for standard questions about their latest charitable endeavors and public appearances. "We are absolutely delighted to welcome you today," the host began, her voice carrying the authority earned from years in television. "Let's start with a question that truly interests our audience, one that occupies the minds of millions. Your recent documentary has sparked lively discussions. Harry, what compelled you to speak so candidly about such personal and intimate moments of your family life?" Harry leaned forward, his hands clasped, speaking with carefully measured precision. "We felt it was profoundly important and necessary to tell our story honestly and openly, without any embellishment," he began. "For too long, stories about us have circulated that were untrue and distorted. We wanted people to see us for who we truly are, the challenges our family faced, and to understand why we made the decisions we did." Suddenly, one of the co-hosts, whose reputation was built on her uncompromising nature and ability to ask uncomfortable questions, interrupted the flow of the conversation with a direct challenge. "However, there are critics who claim that you are cynically exploiting your family's struggles for personal gain, turning personal tragedy into a source of income. How do you counter these accusations that you are, in essence, trading on your royal connections, turning them into a profitable commodity?" A tense silence descended upon the studio, as if to emphasize the sharpness of the question. Meghan's jaw visibly clenched, and Harry's smile lost its sincerity, becoming unnaturally strained. It became clear that the interview had taken a completely different turn, deviating from the pre-agreed script. "That is a fundamentally misinformed representation of what we do," Meghan declared, a steely firmness entering her voice, like a sharp blade being unsheathed. "We are simply sharing our truth, our personal experience. And if someone chooses to label that exploitation, perhaps those individuals should examine their own motives for so vehemently trying to suppress genuine voices and distort our message." Noticing the subtle shift in the studio's atmosphere, but understanding that the unfolding drama was a captivating spectacle for viewers, the co-host pressed on with her interrogation. "Meghan, isn't it fair to acknowledge that when you signed your incredibly lucrative contract, one of the key factors of appeal was precisely your affiliation with the royal family? Wouldn't it be fair to assert that your connection to the British monarchy is the foundation of your marketability and value in the media industry?" Harry became visibly nervous, as if a defense mechanism had been triggered. "Our projects speak for themselves," he stated. "We use our platform to draw attention to pressing issues, to raise questions that are genuinely important to society. And if that brings commercial success, I see no reason why anyone else should be concerned. That is purely our business." "Harry, that's quite curious," the journalist interjected, her voice thoughtful. "After all, your father, now King Charles, has repeatedly stated the family's unwavering commitment to selfless service, not personal enrichment. Don't you see an obvious contradiction here, a clash of values? The atmosphere in the studio seemed to instantly cool, the already low temperature appearing to drop another few degrees. Meghan, composed until this moment, suddenly transformed. Her back straightened, her eyes flashed with anger, previously hidden behind a mask of self-possession. Her voice, now sharp and cold as a winter wind, resonated with indignation. With all due respect, my husband's family has no right to tell us how to provide for ourselves and our children. We were cut off financially. Note, we are not receiving taxpayer money, nor are we living in luxurious palaces provided by the crown. We are forging our own path in life, relying solely on our own strength. The TV host, sensing that the conversation was taking an unexpected and risky turn, yet simultaneously realizing she was witnessing a captivating and potentially historic television event, decided not to miss the moment. She continued to ask questions, pushing Meghan for further revelations. She addressed Meghan's statement about the cessation of financial aid, noting that, according to palace sources, support had indeed been offered, but under certain conditions. The host directly asked if this was related to Meghan's unwillingness to accept those terms. A flush of anger clearly spread across Harry's face. With palpable annoyance in his voice, he uttered a phrase full of sarcasm. Those notorious palace sources. They're always hiding backstage. No one dares to speak the truth to our faces. No one is willing to take responsibility for the disinformation they sow. These anonymous rumor-mongers have been poisoning our lives for years. At this moment, one of the hosts, trying to smooth things over, turned to Harry with a direct question. Are you implying members of your own family? Your father? Your brother? Do you seriously believe they launched an entire campaign against you? Harry, raising his voice slightly, replied, I believe that within this institution, a certain, very conservative system has developed, and anyone who poses a threat to its foundations immediately becomes an object of intense scrutiny and pressure. My wife became such a target as soon as she demonstrated her independence and unwillingness to be controlled. The co-hosts exchanged eloquent glances, realizing that the drama unfolding before them surpassed all their wildest expectations. The undisguised emotions in Harry's voice were so powerful that they were literally palpable, even through the television screen. The journalist, missing no detail, leaned forward with professional intuition. So you insist that the royal family deliberately acted against Meghan? That's an extremely serious statement, Harry. Meghan, not letting her finish, forcefully countered. It's not just an accusation. It's an undeniable fact. And frankly, I no longer intend to pretend it's not. I am tired of defending those who never considered my protection. Harry turned to his wife, and in the fleeting glance that passed between them, there was a premonition of even greater tension to come. Meghan, Harry said quietly but clearly, his voice distinctly audible through the microphones. Perhaps we should focus on discussing our current projects. His words sounded more like a stern warning than gentle advice. Meghan's response was immediate and filled with indignation. No, Harry, I am no longer going to stick to safe topics. I am tired of pretending everything is fine when it is far from the truth. She turned sharply to the hosts, her eyes burning with such fire that those present in the studio involuntarily recoiled. You want to know about the mysterious palace sources? Let me tell you about these sources. They spread false stories about my alleged tantrums, about how I made Kate cry, about my unbearable, demanding nature at work. All of it, dirty lies, fabricated with the sole purpose of portraying me as the villain in this story, in which I was, in reality, the victim. In an attempt to rein in the escalating interview, the host gestured for order. "Meghan, the accusations you've made are extremely serious, considering we are live on air." "Precisely because they are true, they are serious," Meghan retorted. "I have irrefutable evidence at my disposal. Text messages, emails, audio recordings, confirming every word I've said. The only question is whether there is anyone brave enough willing to make the truth public, rather than mindlessly repeating slogans convenient for the palace." Prince Harry's face instantly drained of color. "Meghan, please stop," his barely audible voice pleaded. "What am I doing?" Meghan sharply turned to her husband, and the undisguised fury in her voice made the entire audience hold its breath. "I am finally speaking the truth that you have been afraid to utter for years. I am no longer going to cover for those who tried to destroy me, us, and the future of our children." One of the co-hosts, seasoned in the crucible of thousands of sharp television discussions, instantly realized that they were witnessing a historic moment. "Harry, it seems you do not share your wife's position." In a state of deep emotional distress, Harry automatically smoothed his hair, a gesture that involuntarily betrayed his inner turmoil. He expressed his conviction that there were more reasonable approaches to resolving the contradictions that had arisen, rather than radical destruction of everything. According to him, family ties were at stake, the severance of which could prove irreversible. In response to this, Meghan's voice, reaching an incredible pitch, literally stunned everyone present in the studio. With sarcasm in her voice, she asked where these highly valued family relationships were when she was on the verge of suicide. Where were these relatives when she desperately begged for help but was refused under the pretext of protecting the institution's reputation? Where were they when vile discussions were held about the skin color of her unborn child? Complete, almost physically palpable silence descended upon the set. Even the usually bustling cameramen froze like statues, anticipating a pivotal moment. This was one of those rare, fateful episodes in television history, capable of either elevating a person to the peak of fame or forever burying their public career. Breaking the general stupor, one of the hosts was the first to regain her voice and address the guest, wishing to confirm her understanding of Meghan's words. She clarified whether Meghan was truly asserting that members of the royal family had made racist remarks regarding her unborn child. In response to the accusations, Meghan stated with surprising, almost chilling composure that questions had indeed been raised within the royal family about the possible skin color of her son Archie and how it might affect his position in the line of succession. She also emphasized that her husband's relatives showed far more concern for outward decorum than for the true happiness of their own grandchild. At this moment, Harry abruptly stood up from his seat, forcefully pushing his chair, which clattered backward. "Meghan, please stop. Just stop," he said with despair in his voice, as if begging her to be silent. "A solution?" Meghan repeated, and although she remained seated, her voice grew louder, reflecting rising anxiety. "In your opinion, a solution is to silently endure while they systematically try to erase me from history? A solution is to keep smiling and waving when they deliberately spread lies through the media? A solution is to protect their impeccable reputation while they methodically destroy my life?" Amidst the lively discussion, as passions began to escalate, one of the journalists tried to introduce a note of prudence. She addressed Harry and Meghan with a suggestion to take a short break to collect their thoughts, emphasizing that the topic under discussion was clearly causing a storm of emotions. In response to this suggestion, Meghan let out a laugh that held no trace of mirth. Rather, it resembled a bitter smile of disappointment. She stated that this was not merely a matter of emotions, but a matter of survival, a question of ensuring that her children, when they grew up, would know that their mother did not tolerate injustice and did not allow herself to be treated as nothing by people who hypocritically claimed high moral authority. Harry, concerned about the escalation of the conflict, moved closer to his wife. His hands were outstretched in a gesture that could be interpreted as a plea for the argument to cease. He tried to appeal to her feelings, reminding her of William and Catherine and their children, emphasizing that such a development would inflict a devastating blow upon them, one they had never sought. In response to the mention of his brother's name, Meghan's voice trembled, expressing an extreme degree of disbelief and disappointment. She reminded Harry that William had stubbornly ignored his phone calls for many months and allowed his subordinates to engage in backstage intrigues against her to make his own wife appear in a more favorable light. Despite this, Harry desperately exclaimed that William was still his brother, and he, despite everything, felt a deep love for him. At that moment, Meghan, full of determination, rose from her seat and, gazing intently at her husband across the small distance separating their chairs, posed a question full of bitterness and reproach. "What about me, Harry?" She asked if his love for her was strong enough for him to stop defending those who held such animosity towards her. Did he love her enough to finally choose their family rather than his brother's family? This question hung in the air, like a gauntlet thrown, echoing in the tense silence of the studio, making everyone present hold their breath, awaiting an answer. In the room, there was a general understanding. Those gathered had inadvertently found themselves at the epicenter of a spectacle that, by all canons of etiquette, should have remained deeply personal, not displayed to a multi-million audience. One of the TV hosts, realizing the full significance of what was happening, timidly attempted to intervene. "I think you should continue this conversation in private, off camera," she said delicately. "No," Meghan retorted, her gaze fixed on Harry. "I am tired of endless private conversations that invariably turn into public humiliation. I am tired of being asked to solve problems behind closed doors, while they grandly take them public through their trusted journalists. If Harry intends to keep defending his family's honor, sacrificing our marriage, then let the whole world know." The silence in the studio was shattered by Harry's voice, muffled, like the echo of a distant storm. "This is blatant injustice, and you know it perfectly well." Meghan, like a predator, lunged forward, closing the distance between them. The electrified atmosphere in the studio reached its limit. It seemed material and capable of extinguishing even the powerful spotlights. "Justice?" Meghan's voice was full of contempt. "Nothing that happened was just. Justice would have prevailed if I had been accepted into the family as expected with open arms. It would have been fair to protect me from the incessant stream of racist attacks in the press that engulfed me like a tsunami. Justice demanded that my mental health be given more attention than their precious, carved-in-stone protocols." The host, realizing the situation was rapidly spiraling out of control, desperately tried to restore order in the studio. "I believe we urgently need a commercial break," she suggested, hoping to buy time. "No," Meghan cut her off, her gaze fixed on Harry. "No breaks. Not now. Not this time, Harry. I demand you make your choice here and now, before millions of viewers. Are you with me or with them? I can no longer fight this exhausting war alone while you try to sit on two chairs." Prince Harry's gaze, fixed on his wife, seemed frozen in time. On his face, like a screen, a kaleidoscope of emotions unfolded, almost physically painful to watch. The silence in the studio became so palpable that it seemed one could even hear the muffled hum of the air conditioner. The operators, as if obeying an invisible signal, cautiously changed angles, trying to capture every fleeting change in facial expressions, every significant gesture of this couple, who were being closely watched by the entire world. In this tense atmosphere, Duke Harry finally broke the silence. His voice showed clear agitation, caused by the emotions raging within him. He expressed deep indignation at the unfair situation where, according to him, he was being forced to choose between two manifestations of his family. He feared that such a choice would inevitably lead to the severing of ties that might never be restored. Meghan, despite the tears glistening in her eyes, responded with a surprisingly even voice. She clarified that her request was not about choosing between two sides of the same coin, but rather between the past and the future. She urged him to choose between those who abandoned him in the most difficult period of his life, and the woman who consistently offered him her support. In the tense situation unfolding before the viewers, the experienced TV host, instantly assessing what was happening as a potentially high-rating episode, decided to delve deeper into the core of the conflict. She addressed Prince Harry with a question, asking if the decision to renounce royal duties had been predetermined. The Duke of Sussex, turning to the hosts, expressed visible relief at the opportunity to distract himself from his wife's intense gaze and admitted that he shared that viewpoint. He believed that freedom from official duties would allow them to build their own lives while maintaining close family ties. However, he had never expected the situation to become so uncompromising. At this moment, Meghan Markle sharply interrupted him, categorically stating that it was precisely an all-or-nothing principle. She emphasized that this state of affairs had been established from the very beginning, as a targeted campaign of discredit and destruction had been launched against her. With unwavering confidence, she declared the impossibility of remaining neutral in her own life, much less trying to sit on two chairs, when one side was actively striving for her complete exclusion. In that very instant, like a hawk poised to strike, the second host lunged into the attack. Her persistence and tenacity would have been envied by even the most seasoned law enforcement officers. Without hesitation, she directly asked Meghan if she was ready to make public the irrefutable evidence she had alluded to earlier. Meghan, without flinching a single muscle, stated that she had waited for this moment for many years. She explained her long silence by her deep respect for Prince Harry's feelings, and a naive hope that the royal family would come to its senses and acknowledge the depravity of their behavior. However, turning to Harry, she bitterly stated that, alas, this would never happen. In her voice, there was unwavering confidence. They would never apologize, never admit their guilt, and never treat her with the basic respect that every person deserves. Prince Harry's shoulders slumped, as if under the weight of an unbearable burden. He warned Meghan against a rash step, stating that the publication of these recordings and messages could lead to catastrophic consequences, to a complete collapse of everything. He expressed fear that it would cause unbearable pain to innocent people, especially children, who had been drawn into this messy story against their will. In response to this, Meghan's voice again rose, but this time it was not so much fury as a deep emotional wound. She anxiously inquired about the future of her own children, Archie and Lilibet, questioning their right to the truth. Were they not worthy of knowing that their mother bravely fought for their well-being? Did they not have an inherent right to know that at the moment when their crowned grandmother's family tried to diminish their dignity, their mother firmly stood up for them, resolutely rejecting injustice? One of the program's hosts, seeking a compromise, suggested the possibility of resolving the conflict without attracting widespread public attention. She inquired whether they had considered family mediation or confidential negotiations. In response to this suggestion, Meghan let out a bitter laugh. She emphasized that they had exhausted all possible ways to solve the problem. She had repeatedly asked for private meetings, sent letters, and made phone calls, strictly following every proposed protocol. Nevertheless, While she made every effort to settle disagreements in the quiet of offices, opponents methodically leaked information to the press, portraying her negatively as the main antagonist in a situation where she was, in essence, the injured party. Prince Harry, regaining composure, made a new attempt to approach his wife, extending his hands in supplication. He fervently asked Meghan, begging her not to resort to such measures, especially live on air, before a multi-million audience. In response to his gesture, Meghan recoiled, evading his outstretched hands. She rhetorically asked, "Why not?" reminding him of how mercilessly she had been destroyed publicly, in print publications, on websites, and on social media. In her opinion, there was no reason to shield the offenders from the same fate they themselves had prepared for her. One of the journalists, trying to diffuse the tense atmosphere, attempted to introduce a note of appeasement. She emphasized that such an obvious level of pain and anger had clearly matured and accumulated over a long period. Then she turned to Prince Harry, asking if he didn't think his wife deserved his support after all the trials she had been through. Harry froze, stopping his movement towards Meghan, and turned to the hosts. He confirmed that Meghan undoubtedly deserved his support, and that she had it in full. However, he emphasized that supporting his wife should not mean the destruction of his entire family. He expressed his firm conviction that there must be some other, more acceptable way. However, Meghan expressed absolute certainty that no other way out of the situation simply existed. She stressed that all alternative options had been exhausted, that she had shown maximum patience, demonstrated understanding, generously forgiven offenses, and even tried to find excuses for the actions of those who would never seek excuses for her. "I've had enough, Harry," she said, drawing a line under her efforts. "I no longer intend to protect them, and I no longer wish to witness you trying to protect them while they continue to hurt us." The TV host, perfectly aware that the interview had reached its climax, made a final desperate attempt to provide the couple with an opportunity to avoid irreparable consequences. "Perhaps you both should take a break and carefully consider the situation before making any final decisions," she suggested, trying to slightly ease the tension. "No," Meghan categorically replied, her voice showing unwavering resolve. "I've been thinking about this for many years. Harry, I need an answer here and now. Are you going to stand by your wife and children? Or will you continue your futile attempts to maintain ties with people who, since your decision to marry me, have shown you nothing but contempt?" A tense silence fell over the studio, as Harry, like a cornered animal, scanned the room for an imaginary exit. The host's eyes held a frozen curiosity, akin to watching an impending tragedy. The audience held their breath, awaiting his decision. "I need time," his quiet, almost imperceptible voice finally uttered. He added that he couldn't make such momentous decisions overnight, especially under the glare of television cameras. These words, like a whip, struck Meghan. Fleeting pain crossed her face, quickly replaced by a mask of icy composure. "Time?" she repeated, a steely edge in her voice. After everything they had been through together, after all the trials they had faced, he still needed time to decide whether he would support his own wife. "Meghan, you misunderstood." Harry exclaimed in desperation, trying to smooth things over. But the words, once spoken, could not be unsaid, and it was too late. "No, I think I understood perfectly well," Meghan replied, deliberately picking up her purse from the chair. She added that he had tried to straddle two worlds for too long, forgetting that there are moments in life when one must choose. Suddenly, one of the hosts, her face etched with deep concern, leaned forward and addressed Meghan. "Meghan, where are you going?" "I'm going home to my children," Meghan answered, her voice even, though genuine pain was visible in her eyes. I'm going home to find the words to explain to them why their father chooses to protect those who hurt their mother, instead of safeguarding his own family. Harry, following her, pleaded, "Meghan, please don't leave like this. Please don't make this situation even more public than it already is." Meghan turned to him, and her voice carried a finality, as if a door had slammed shut, cutting off all paths back. "I'm not making this public, Harry. I'm just speaking the truth for the first time in a long time. I'm honestly acknowledging what this marriage has cost me, and what price our children will pay for it if nothing changes." She turned her gaze directly to the main camera lens, addressing the millions of viewers who were unwittingly witnessing the unraveling of one of the world's most talked-about love stories. "I want everyone watching right now to know, I tried. I desperately tried to make it work. I strive to be the perfect royal spouse, an exemplary daughter-in-law, an ideal addition to their family. But, unfortunately, effort alone is not enough when the other side makes no effort." With these words, Meghan Markle triumphantly exited the set, leaving behind a ringing silence, a shattered husband, and a moment that would forever enter the annals of television. Prince Harry, as if thunderstruck, froze in place before slowly turning to the host. A mask of profound shock and unconcealed sorrow was etched on his face. "I suppose," he murmured barely audibly, "we should conclude this interview." The cameras continued to impassively record the events, while the host desperately tried to find words to summarize what had transpired. But, in essence, any commentary was superfluous. Before the astonished public's eyes, the tragic finale of a modern fairy tale unfolded, and everyone present understood this. An oppressive silence settled over the studio, as if time itself had stopped in its relentless march. In the control room, panic reigned. Producers frantically sought a solution, trying to figure out how to fill the sudden void in the broadcast. The executive producer, a woman who had dedicated 3 decades of her life to television, froze before the monitors, realizing she had witnessed a historic event that would be documented in media textbooks. Her hands trembled as she gave instructions to the camera operators to continue filming. Despite the drama's main character having left the studio, Prince Harry, left completely alone in the eye of the unfolding storm, slowly sank into his chair. His face was ashen, and his gaze, fixed on nothing, seemed to be trying to grasp the full magnitude of what had just occurred. Experienced hosts, with years of flawless on-air work behind them, found themselves in a situation that left them utterly bewildered. They exchanged knowing glances, reflecting their awareness of the unprecedented nature of the moment, capable of fundamentally altering the course of their show. Finally, one of the co-hosts, overcoming a momentary stupor, addressed Harry with the caution of someone approaching a creature that had suffered a painful injury. She suggested a break to allow him to compose himself and gather his thoughts. The prince slowly lifted his head. His voice was fractured, as if he had just been in a serious car accident. He stated that the public deserved honest explanations regarding what had happened. Meanwhile, Meghan, having left the studio, found herself in the corridor surrounded by her team of bodyguards and personal assistants. Traces of the recent confrontation lingered on her face, but anger was mixed with a hint of relief. For years, she had suppressed her true emotions and feelings, but on this day, something inside her had finally broken. A young man, one of her assistants who had worked with her for several years, approached her with clear concern on his face and suggested they immediately go to the car. Meghan shook her head, explaining her decision by the need to ensure Harry was all right, as, despite all their disagreements, he remained the father of her children. Back in the studio, Prince Harry addressed the viewers, his words, amplified by the power of television, reaching every corner of the globe. "My wife Meghan," he declared, is truly an extraordinary individual, a paragon of unbreakable will, deep conviction, and untamed passion. Everything she revealed today about the hardships she endured and how she was treated, every word of it is the absolute truth. After a brief pause, during which he seemed to gather his composure, the prince continued, "However, I am also a son, a brother, an integral part of a family that, despite all its flaws, remains my family. And the conflict between these two aspects tears me apart from within." One of the hosts, displaying delicacy, leaned slightly forward and asked, "Harry, how will this affect your marriage, your relationship with the royal family?" In response, the prince ran his hands over his face, the gesture conveying deep weariness and despair. "Honestly, I don't know," he admitted. "Today, I feel like a person lost at sea in a raging storm. I love my wife more than anything in the world. She has been my anchor during the darkest times. But I cannot simply erase over 30 years of my life and pretend my family doesn't exist." In the pulsating heart of the control room, like the epicenter of an informational storm, producers were fielding a barrage of calls. High-ranking network executives, representatives from the majestic Buckingham Palace, and influential media moguls from around the globe all clamored for one thing: to know what would happen next. The television show's ratings skyrocketed to unimaginable heights, easily surpassing even the boldest and most optimistic forecasts. Across the vast expanse of social media, hashtags inextricably linked to Harry and Meghan's names triumphantly dominated all leading trend positions, and the number of views for short video clips numbered in the tens of millions. Meanwhile, within the walls of Buckingham Palace, like a besieged fortress, an emergency council convened. Upon receiving immediate news of the events, King Charles III promptly cancelled all previously scheduled engagements and convened his closest advisors. The atmosphere in the royal study was electrified to the limit, as if before an approaching storm. Even the king's private secretary, a man whose imperturbable composure was legendary, especially during the sharpest moments of crisis, appeared visibly agitated. "Your Majesty, the situation is developing with dizzying speed. American and British media outlets are already preparing special broadcasts. It is vitally important that we develop a clear and effective response strategy," he reported. King Charles remained silent, his gaze fixed on the serene gardens outside Buckingham Palace. Finally, he broke the silence, his voice carrying the weight of a person bearing an immense burden. How did the situation reach such a critical point? How was such a turn of events allowed? The monarch's advisor cautiously noted that now was perhaps not the most opportune moment for deep introspection. It was necessary to take swift action to minimize the reputational damage inflicted upon the crown. "Damage?" The king sharply turned to his advisor, and a shadow of deep sorrow flickered in his gaze. "My son has just publicly demonstrated a conflict between his wife and his own family. The monarch's daughter-in-law has leveled serious accusations of racism and cruelty. What greater damage could there be?" Prince William, upon receiving urgent news of the events, immediately interrupted his official duties and rushed to the palace. A mask of restrained anger and deep disappointment was etched on his face. Entering his father's study, he immediately got to the point, without formalities. William stated that decisive action was needed, as the situation had spiraled out of control. He accused Harry of allowing this woman to inflict irreparable harm on their family's reputation. The king raised a hand, gesturing to stop his son. He reminded William that this woman was the mother of his grandchildren, and despite their disagreements, she remained part of their family. "Part of the family?" William's voice rang out, masking a storm of indignation behind a facade of disbelief. "Father, allow me to remind you that this woman just publicly accused us of racism, of inhumane attempts to drive her to suicide, of vile discussions about the color of her unborn child's skin. How can we possibly continue to consider her part of our family after all this?" Meanwhile, across the ocean, in the United States, a storm of public outrage erupted. Telephones in the offices of leading media corporations rang off the hook. Broadcasting giants such as CNN, NBC, and ABC hastily prepared special broadcasts dedicated to the scandalous interview. Oprah Winfrey, who had previously interviewed the embattled couple, released a statement filled with sorrow and empathy. "My heart breaks for Harry and Meghan. Today's events only confirm how deep the wounds are. Wounds that do not heal with time." Celebrities, as if on cue, unleashed a barrage of comments on social media. Serena Williams, the renowned tennis player, wrote, "Meghan is one of the strongest and most courageous women I know. She deserves love and support, not this nightmare she's had to endure." Returning to the studio, Prince Harry continued his emotional monologue, filled with bitterness and disappointment. "Society believes that being part of the royal family is all privileges and an unclouded life. But people don't see the high price we are forced to pay, the price our wives pay, our children pay." Meghan entered our family with an open heart, with a sincere desire to serve and contribute. But instead of a warm welcome, she encountered an icy reception. Instead of protection, she faced betrayal and intrigue. During the candid interview, a key question touched upon the theme of betrayal, causing Prince Harry to fall silent for a moment, as if engaged in an internal struggle. After a pause, he shared his thoughts. In his opinion, betrayal manifests in situations where the family uses the media to discredit a spouse, deliberately disseminates information that distorts her image, and refuses to protect her from manifestations of racism. He posed a rhetorical question, emphasizing that such actions were difficult to characterize otherwise. At this time, in their cozy estate in Montecito, Harry and Meghan's children were spending time in the garden, supervised by nannies, unaware of the tumultuous events unfolding in the adult world. Little Archie, already perceptive enough to the surrounding atmosphere, asked his nanny about his parents' whereabouts, sensing the rising tension. The nanny, professionally trained for such situations, tried to reassure the child, promising that Mommy and Daddy would return soon, and suggested they continue building their sandcastle. However, even she could not entirely conceal the concern reflected in her eyes. The reaction to the situation was not limited to their personal circle. Prominent political figures from various countries also expressed their opinions. The Prime Minister of Canada, a country that had once sheltered Harry and Meghan, issued a restrained statement, emphasizing Canada's friendly relationship with members of the British royal family, and expressing hope for reconciliation between the parties. The President of France, known for his forthright statements, was more candid, hinting at the need for monarchical institutions to reevaluate their approaches to modernity and inclusivity. Within the walls of the British Parliament, a heated debate unfolded. The leader of the opposition addressed the government with a sharp question, demanding clarification. How long would British taxpayers be forced to support a structure that, by all appearances, cannot even resolve its own internal disagreements? The Prime Minister, finding himself in a delicate position, attempted to give an evasive answer, emphasizing that the government refrains from commenting on the private lives of members of the royal family, expressing hope for a peaceful resolution to the conflict among all involved parties. At the same time, Meghan, still within the studio's confines, received an urgent call from her mother. Doria Ragland, a woman who had always served as a steadfast pillar of support for her daughter, spoke in an agitated voice, full of concern. "Meghan, darling, I watched the broadcast. I am so proud of you for finally speaking your truth, but I'm also worried about what happens next." Meghan, allowing herself to show emotion for the first time all day, replied through tears, "Mom, I don't know what will happen. I just realized I can't stay silent anymore. For too long, I protected those who never stood up for me." In the television studio, Prince Harry continued to answer the host's questions, and every word he uttered was a bombshell for the British monarchy. He confirmed Meghan's words that their son had faced unabashed prejudice. According to Harry, there were indeed conversations about how Archie's skin color might affect the royal family's image. The prince admitted that these discussions were not only inappropriate, but also deeply hurtful. He expressed regret that he had not stopped these conversations at the time. The host attempted to elicit more details on the sensitive topic. When directly asked if he could reveal the specifics of these discussions, Harry declined. He explained that some aspects of the story were too painful and deeply personal to reveal publicly. However, he emphasized that the core issue was that his wife and son faced manifestations of racism and prejudice within an institution that, in theory, should have provided them with protection and support. Following these statements, social media literally exploded with responses from users worldwide. Hashtags in support of Meghan, such as #HadIStandWithMeghan, instantly trended on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. Thousands of people shared personal stories of experiencing racism and feelings of isolation, finding reflections of their own experiences in Meghan's revelations. Community activists and human rights advocates organized large-scale demonstrations in support of Meghan outside the British consulate in New York. The streets were filled with placards bearing slogans like, "Meghan was right," and "End royal racism." At the same time, supporters of the monarchy did not remain aloof from the escalating conflict. Defenders of the royal family, including distinguished veterans and influential charitable organizations that had collaborated with the princes for many years, rose to King Charles and Prince William's defense. The head of one of the largest charitable organizations, with 20 years of experience working with King Charles, firmly stated that the accusations of racism were utterly baseless, emphasizing that the prince had dedicated his life to public service. However, these voices, despite their authority, were barely audible amidst the raging sea of criticism and support surrounding Meghan. At Buckingham Palace, advisors spent a sleepless night devising various response strategies for the situation. Among the options considered were complete denial of all accusations, issuing public apologies with promises of reforms, and an attempt to reach a compromise and bring Harry and Meghan back into the family fold. Each proposed scenario carried specific risks and potential consequences for the future of the monarchy. King Charles, having carefully reviewed all the presented proposals, made a difficult decision, stating his desire to find a way to preserve both his son and the crown without choosing between them. Princess Catherine, William's wife, who had remained in the shadows of the conflict until this moment, inadvertently found herself drawn into the eye of the storm. Meghan's mention of her name in the context of behind-the-scenes intrigues caused serious concern among palace advisors. Catherine, being one of the most beloved and popular figures in the royal family, was vulnerable, and any stain on her reputation could spell disaster for the monarchy. Her press secretary worked frantically, preparing statements designed to protect the princess and not exacerbate the already tense atmosphere. Finally, Meghan left the studio, first taking a few minutes to speak with the eager press. Her words conveyed determination and sincerity. "Today, I shared a truth that I had kept deep inside for a long time. My action is dictated not by a desire for revenge, but by a deep love for my children. They have the right to know that their mother did not give up and fought for their well-being. Addressing the question of her marriage's future, she noted, "Harry is a kind-hearted person caught in an extremely difficult situation. Regardless of how our relationship develops going forward, he will forever remain the father of my children, and I will always sincerely wish him the very best." At the same time, within the studio where the interview was recorded, Harry was concluding his part of the revelations. "I want everyone to understand. Meghan is not the cause of the discord in our family. She merely illuminated problems that existed long before her arrival. Problems we preferred to ignore, naively believing they would disappear on their own." He paused briefly, fixing his gaze directly on the camera lens, and continued, "My mother, Princess Diana, also tried to bring about changes to the established order, faced fierce resistance, and suffered. I swore to myself that I would not allow her tragic fate to befall my wife." Princess Diana's name, suddenly uttered in the room, had the effect of a bombshell. This was the first direct comparison of Meghan to Prince Harry's tragically departed mother, which was imbued with the deepest symbolism. "The main difference," Harry emphasized, "is that my mother was alone in her struggle. Meghan is not. Her children are by my side, and millions of people around the world share her truth." In Los Angeles, where many of Meghan's friends from the entertainment industry reside, the reaction was unequivocal. Hollywood stars with whom she had collaborated before her marriage, one by one began publishing words of support. The producer of the popular series Suits, in which Meghan once starred, stated, "Meghan was always a paragon of professionalism. Intelligent, talented, compassionate. The way she was treated is simply unacceptable." Directors, actors, producers, all unanimously spoke of Meghan as a person of absolute integrity and high moral principles. However, not everyone reacted positively. Conservative media outlets in the United Kingdom launched a fierce campaign against Meghan. Editorials accused her of attempting to Americanize the British monarchy, of disregarding centuries-old traditions, and of destroying the family for personal gain. Some commentators went further, suggesting that Prince Harry be stripped of all his titles and removed from the line of succession. The global community reacted to the events ambiguously, showcasing a wide spectrum of opinions and assessments. Commonwealth nations, whose historical ties to the British Empire are marked by complex relationships, paid particular attention to the situation. The Prime Minister of Jamaica, in his official address, emphasized that the events unfolding within the British royal family serve as a reminder of the relentless need to eradicate racism in all its forms and manifestations. Leaders of African countries, mindful of Meghan's mother's heritage, expressed their support and sympathy for her. As news spread across the globe, it became evident that what had transpired transcended a typical family dispute. This event became a catalyst for society to re-evaluate established views on racial discrimination, power structures, and the immutability of traditions. In academic circles, universities began holding thematic lectures and seminars aimed at comprehensively shedding light on the events. Sociologists and psychologists, in turn, began analyzing the underlying processes that led to such a tumultuous turn of events. Dr. Susan Davis, an expert in family psychology, noted in an interview with CNN, "What we witnessed is a textbook example of how years of accumulated psychological trauma can erupt." In striving to meet the expectations imposed upon her, Meghan suppressed her feelings for a long time. But everyone has a breaking point. She also emphasized that a public airing of grievances between spouses could have long-term negative consequences for their relationship and their children's future. Economically, The unfolding scandal brought tangible consequences. Shares of companies closely associated with the British monarchy showed a decline. Tourist firms recorded a wave of cancellations for previously booked tours of royal residences. At the same time, everything related to Meghan Markle experienced an unprecedented surge. Literary works dedicated to her life and activities instantly soared to the top of Amazon's online store rankings, becoming bestsellers within hours. Amidst the escalating tension, security services in both the United States and the United Kingdom were placed on high alert. The number of threats addressed to the participants in the unfolding drama increased exponentially. Emergency measures were taken to enhance the security of Meghan and her children, and additional instructions were issued to palace security staff to ensure the protection of royal family members. At her Montecito mansion, Meghan was reunited with her children. Little Archie, intuitively sensing that something was wrong, rushed into his mother's arms. Meghan, clutching her son tightly, whispered words of comfort, trying to reassure him that everything would be all right. However, deep down, she knew that their old life could not be recovered. Prince Harry, having finished the scandalous interview, got into the car heading home, left alone with his thoughts. The driver, a seasoned professional, remained silent, understanding that his passenger was experiencing one of the most difficult periods of his life. Harry, gazing out the window at the flickering lights of nighttime Los Angeles, pondered how to explain what happened to his children, how to restore harmony in his relationship with his wife, and how to find a compromise between loyalty to his family and love for his chosen one. At the majestic Buckingham Palace, King Charles convened an extraordinary meeting with a small circle of trusted advisors. Following intense debates, a final decision was made. An official statement from the royal family would be issued at dawn. The statement's text was refined late into the night, every word meticulously analyzed, for too much was at stake. Prince William, having left the palace, headed to his home, where his wife Catherine and children awaited him. Her distressed appearance indicated that it had been an extremely difficult day. "What awaits us?" she asked anxiously. William embraced her, but his gesture lacked assurance. "I don't know," he admitted. "I just don't know." Meanwhile, around the world, the journalistic community worked tirelessly, preparing reports and analytical reviews of the unfolding events. Newsrooms of major publications hastily revamped their front pages, and television channels prepared special news broadcasts. This was one of those rare, decades-defining events capable of altering the course of history. In the virtual sphere of social media, heated debates erupted, never ceasing for a moment. Supporters of Meghan and loyalists of the royal family exchanged sharp retorts, not always adhering to proper decorum. Platform moderators worked overtime, striving to curb the flood of comments and prevent the escalation of hostility. As the new day dawned, it became evident that the established world order had undergone irreversible changes. The centuries-old monarchy, once seemingly an impregnable fortress, suddenly found itself under a barrage of doubt and criticism. The family unit, which was meant to exemplify unity and harmony, visibly fractured before the astonished public, exposing deep contradictions. At the epicenter of these dramatic events was a woman whose sole desire was to protect herself and her children from the gathering storm. What horizons will open before us in the future? Can the royal dynasty regain lost trust and restore its tarnished reputation? Will Prince Harry and Meghan Markle find a path to reconciliation and heal the wounds inflicted? And finally, what long-term consequences will this watershed moment have for the British monarchy and for the institution of the royal family on a global scale? This captivating story, like a powerful spotlight, illuminated the strength of truth, exposed the cost of silence, and underscored the importance of standing up for one's convictions, even when the world's most influential institutions are on the other side of the barricades. Who, in your opinion, was right in this unprecedented confrontation that forever changed the face of modern monarchy? Whose truth proved stronger, and who paid the highest price for this high-profile conflict?